I heard my stepfather's voice through the speakerphone before I even set my coffee down. The soft opening went perfect. Almost too perfect, once she wasn't there to complicate things. I stood in my kitchen in Denver, holding the phone Caleb had accidentally left open. My brother's business partner, unaware I was still on the line, and every certainty I had about my family cracked open in under 4 seconds. I had wired $150,000 into that restaurant. I had cosigned nothing on purpose, promised nothing beyond that loan, and somehow I had just heard my own name mentioned like a liability someone had quietly removed from a room. I didn't hang up right away. I stayed on that call for 6 more minutes, silent, listening to people plan a future that apparently didn't include me, and by the time I finally set the phone down, I already knew I wasn't going to explode. I was going to find out exactly what they thought they'd gotten away with. My name is Renee Calloway. I'm 34, I work logistics for a mid-size distribution company, and until that phone call, I thought I understood my family completely. My younger brother Caleb had spent 3 years trying to turn a struggling neighborhood bar into an actual restaurant, and when his equipment lease defaulted last spring, I was the one who covered it. Not because anyone begged, because I'd spent my whole life being the sibling who fixed things quietly and never made anyone say thank you twice. My stepfather, Walt, had raised Caleb and me both since I was 11, and for years I told myself the coldness between us was just his personality, not something aimed at me specifically. I was wrong about that too, but I didn't know it yet. The soft opening was supposed to happen the following weekend. I'd already blocked the date, already told my manager I needed the Friday off, already picked out what I was going to wear. 2 days before, Caleb texted that they'd decided to push it up. Low-key, family only, nothing big, we'll do a proper thing later for you. I believed him. I always believed him. So when photos started showing up on our cousin Priya's page that same Friday night, string lights, a banner. Walt standing behind the bar with his arm around Caleb like he'd built the place himself, I told myself there'd been a scheduling mix-up. Then I heard the call, and a scheduling mix-up doesn't explain someone saying it went smoother because I wasn't there. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I wasn't the difficult one. I was the one who asked questions when Walt made comments about my ex-husband that weren't really jokes. I was the one who told Caleb, gently, that maybe using investor money to pay himself a salary before the restaurant turned a profit wasn't the wisest move. Nobody in that family had ever accused me of being wrong. They just started calling it exhausting to be around someone who noticed things. I didn't understand yet how deliberately that reputation had been built, or who had been building it. 2 weeks after the soft opening I wasn't invited to, I got a call from a woman named Adele at the bank that had underwritten Caleb's expansion loan. She was polite, careful, the way people are when they're about to tell you something they know will upset you. She said she was doing routine verification on a secondary credit line and wanted to confirm my consent as a listed guarantor. I told her I'd never guaranteed anything beyond the original personal loan I'd given Caleb directly, which hadn't gone through a bank at all. She went quiet for a second, then asked if I could come in and look at some paperwork in person. The document had my name on it, my signature, or something close enough to pass a glance. A guarantor agreement dated 6 weeks earlier, tying me to $80,000 of commercial financing for equipment I'd never approved and never seen an invoice for. I sat in that little glass office and stared at a signature that wasn't mine, but was close enough that I understood immediately someone had practiced it. Adele asked if I wanted to file a fraud report right then. I told her I needed a day. That was the moment I stopped being someone who reacted and became someone who built a case. I didn't call Caleb. I didn't call Walt. I drove home and sat at my kitchen table with the copy of that document Adele had let me take, and I made a list of everything that suddenly made sense in a different light. The way Caleb had asked me, months earlier. For a copy of my driver's license, for the insurance paperwork on the walk-in freezer. The way Walt had started referring to the restaurant as our investment in front of relatives, never mentioning whose money had actually saved it. The way my mother, when I'd mentioned feeling shut out of the planning, had told me I was reading into things that everyone was just busy. Busy. That word had been doing a lot of work in my family for a long time. I hired a forensic document examiner named Priest, a retired detective who now did handwriting analysis for small firms and estate disputes. I didn't tell him whose signature it was, just handed him 3 samples of my actual signature and the guarantor page. He came back in 4 days with a report that used words like inconsistent pressure patterns and simulated formation, which was a formal way of saying somebody had traced or copied my handwriting badly enough that a professional could tell in under an hour. I also pulled my full credit report and found the inquiry from the secondary lender, dated the same week Caleb had asked for my ID for the freezer. Small detail. It mattered more than almost anything else I found. I still went to family dinners. I still answered Walt's calls about scheduling the actual grand opening, the one they were planning to do properly this time, with me included, they said, like a consolation prize. I smiled through a Sunday lunch where my mother mentioned how proud she was of Caleb for finally taking initiative on his own financing. I didn't correct her. Not yet. I had become 2 people that month, one who passed the salt and asked about Caleb's new sous chef, and one who was quietly building a folder that would end with someone explaining themselves to a bank's fraud division. The bigger truth arrived through Priya, of all people, the same cousin whose photos had first tipped me off. She mentioned, offhand, over coffee, that Walt had been the one who suggested using my information. Since I already had good credit, and probably wouldn't even notice a small line item on a loan, I'd already half-funded anyway. She said it like it was almost a compliment, like they'd chosen me because I was trustworthy collateral rather than a person who might object. I asked her to repeat it. She did, not realizing what she'd just handed me. This wasn't Caleb panicking under financial pressure. This was Walt directing it, using my own reputation for being reliable as the exact tool to bypass asking my permission. I called my lawyer, a woman named Farida I'd used years earlier for a lease dispute, and laid out everything: the forged guarantor document, the credit inquiry timeline, the forensic report. Priya's comment. Farida told me I had enough for both a fraud complaint with the lender and, if I wanted, a civil claim against whoever had signed my name. She also told me something I hadn't considered. Because the loan had already been partially drawn against, my forged signature meant I could be held liable if the restaurant defaulted, unless I moved to formally void the guarantee immediately. That reframed everything. This wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was exposure. If Caleb's restaurant failed, and restaurants fail constantly, I could be the one a collections agency came looking for a debt I never agreed to carry. I didn't confront anyone yet. I let Farida send a formal notice to the lender, voiding the guarantee based on the forensic findings, which triggered the bank to freeze the secondary credit line pending investigation. I let the family keep planning their grand opening. I wanted to see what they'd do once the money got harder to access, because people get careless exactly when they think the hard part is over. It took 11 days. Caleb called me sounding panicked, saying the bank had frozen a line of credit right before a produce order was due, and did I know anything about it, since my name was somehow on the paperwork. I asked him calmly whose idea it had been to put my name there. He said it fast, the way people do when they're more scared of the immediate problem than the one still coming. He said Walt told him it would be fine, that I'd never check, that family didn't need to ask permission for things that helped everyone. He said it like an apology and an excuse at the same time, and he didn't yet understand that he just confirmed everything in a phone call I was recording, legally, in a one-party consent state. Exactly the way Farida had told me to if the subject ever came up. The grand opening happened anyway, 3 weeks later, bigger than the soft opening had been. I was invited this time, properly, with my name on the printed program as an early supporter, a phrase that made me want to laugh out loud. I went. I wore the same dress I'd bought for the first event I'd been quietly uninvited from. Walt gave a toast near the end of the night, standing by the bar with a glass raised, talking about how family sacrifice built this place, about trusting the people who loved you, about how sometimes the ones who complicate things the most are the ones who understand least what it takes to build something. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. Half the room glanced at me anyway. I waited until the toast finished and the applause settled before I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I asked Walt, in front of enough people that the question couldn't quietly disappear afterward, whether he wanted to explain to everyone how my signature ended up on an $80,000 guarantee I never saw. The room went the kind of quiet that has weight to it. Walt tried the same line he'd used with me privately weeks earlier, something about family not needing formal permission. But this time Farida's letter existed, the forensic report existed. And Caleb's own recorded voice existed admitting whose idea it had been. I told Walt I wasn't there to argue about family. I was there to correct the record, and the record now included a fraud complaint already filed with his own bank. I didn't stay to watch what happened next in detail, but I know some of it. The lender's fraud division opened a formal review within the week. Because the guarantee was void and the forensic report was conclusive, the bank pursued the matter as an internal compliance issue rather than pressing charges immediately. But it cost Caleb the secondary credit line entirely and put the entire loan under review, which meant the equipment vendor pulled 2 orders, and the opening month ran leaner than planned. Walt lost something less measurable but more permanent. He lost the version of himself that got to stand in a room and be trusted without question. My mother, to her credit, didn't defend him publicly that night. She sat very still and later called me in tears, saying she hadn't known, which I believed, because not knowing had clearly been convenient for everyone who did. Caleb and I didn't speak for 2 months. When we finally did, it wasn't a reconciliation scene, just a quiet lunch where he apologized without qualifying it, and told me he'd removed himself as a joint decision-maker on anything involving Walt going forward. I told him I still believed in the restaurant. I never stopped believing in what he could build. I just wasn't going to keep being the invisible foundation nobody bothered to ask before building on top of me. We agreed on new terms for my original loan, in writing this time, reviewed by Farida, with both our names spelled correctly and both our signatures verified by an actual notary sitting in the room. Walt and I still see each other at family things, though there are fewer of them now, and he's careful in a way he never used to be. He doesn't make comments about complicating things anymore. I think he finally understood that the version of me who noticed small inconsistencies wasn't a personality flaw to be managed around. It was the only reason his fraud got caught before it became someone else's 5-figure debt. The restaurant is still open, doing well, actually. Caleb sends me photos sometimes, off the record, before official launches, just to make sure I see them first. Small gesture. It means more than he probably realizes. Last month, my mother hosted a birthday dinner for me. First time in years, she'd organized something around my schedule, instead of expecting me to build my life around everyone else's. Nobody made a toast about sacrifice. Nobody needed to. I sat at a table where my name had been written on the place card in someone else's handwriting, and for once that felt like exactly what it was supposed to be, not a signature I had to question. Just a small proof that I'd finally been counted before the room filled up. If you'd been in my position, would you have confronted them the moment you heard that phone call, or would you have waited, the way I did, until the proof could speak for you?